I never intended to uncover that truth. Some things are better left buried in dusty boxes, forgotten in attic corners. But on a sweltering July afternoon, while searching for my old ballet shoes for show and tell at school, I, just a 6-year-old child who had never known sorrow, opened a door I should never have stepped through. My grandmother's attic in Georgia had always stirred my curiosity. Old trunks, faded photographs, the scent of aged wood blended with traces of long-lost lavender. I dug through cartons, rustled layers of old newspapers, and then I found a small plastic box, unlabeled, holding a worn VHS tape. Curious, I brought it down to the living room, where the ancient VCR still sat beneath the TV my grandmother only used when guests were over. I loaded the tape myself. The screen flickered, and there they were. My parents. They looked much younger. Mom had short hair and a bright smile. Dad still had the mustache he later shaved off because it made him look old. "We're so excited to share this wonderful news," my mom said, gently resting her hand on her belly. Finally, the doctor confirmed it. "It's a boy," my dad chimed in, his eyes gleaming. "Now the Rollins name will carry on." Mom teared up. "We've waited so long for this moment. Now our family will finally be complete." I sat cross-legged on the carpet, my small heart beginning to ache, though I didn't understand why. The timestamp on the video read 2007, but my brother Logan was only 3. Something didn't add up. Something was terribly wrong. And then, like glass shattering in my mind, I realized they had been waiting for a boy long before I was born. I was their first attempt, and clearly I had failed. "Grace, what are you watching?" Grandma Rose's voice startled me from behind. She stepped into the room, laundry basket in her arms, eyes wide in shock at the screen. The basket slipped from her grasp, clean clothes scattered across the floor. "Oh dear Lord," she whispered, rushing to turn off the TV. But I had already heard enough, far too much. "They only wanted a boy," I choked, throat dry. "From the beginning. They never wanted a girl." She knelt down, pulling me into her arms. She smelled of lavender, warm and familiar, but nothing could stop my tears that day. "Grace, sweetheart," she said softly, carefully choosing her words. "Sometimes adults get stuck in narrow expectations, but that doesn't reflect your true worth." I pulled away, my eyes locking with hers, sharp as a blade. "Is that why they sent me to live with you? Because I wasn't the child they wanted?" She was silent in a way that confessed everything. I came to Grandma Rose's house on a snowy winter morning. The porch was blanketed in white and my dad's pickup still puffed faint clouds of exhaust. They didn't kiss me goodbye. They just hurriedly lifted me down, handed Grandma a light purple suitcase and said one thing: "Grace will stay here for a while. We need to adjust to the baby's schedule." I nodded. At 6, I didn't ask questions. I just thought I was visiting because Mom was too tired and Dad was working too hard. I believed that, almost for a full year. Grandma Rose lived on the outskirts of Savannah, in a 3-story-old house with a wide front porch and white wooden fence. Each morning she made me scrambled eggs and toast. Each night she read me fairy tales before bed. No scolding, no distant glances. No one said, "Grace, don't bother us." There, for the first time, I got to choose my favorite ice cream. I got to eat dinner without rushing off so Mom could rest during her pregnancy. Once, I overheard Grandma Rose on the phone with my parents. She was speaking quietly in the kitchen, but her voice was clear enough for me to hear from the staircase. "She needs to know she's not being abandoned, Matthew. Whatever the reason, you can't treat my granddaughter like a placeholder." I didn't understand all of it then, but I remembered every word. Then Logan was born. I wasn't brought home. I only saw him in a few blurry photos Mom sent to Grandma with a note: "Logan's such a cutie. Grace will love playing with him when she's older." Time passed. My 7th birthday card was signed only Dad and Mom, with no handwritten message. That summer, I stopped hoping they'd come pick me up for the weekend. One night, I asked Grandma Rose, "Grandma, if I hadn't been born a girl, would things be different?" She paused her knitting, looked up at me. didn't answer right away. Race, some people will never see the gem right in front of them just because it isn't the color they hoped for. I said nothing, but from that moment, I understood. I wasn't the special helper in the garden. I wasn't the big sister temporarily filling in. I'd been sent away, like someone clearing the stage for the grand debut of the real child. I had been the child who made room. One Sunday afternoon, Grandma called me to the kitchen. She pointed at a letter on the table. Mom's writing saying Logan was allergic to cat hair, so they couldn't take me back unless she got rid of her cat, Whiskey. "We can't give him away, you know," Grandma said evenly. "I know," I replied. "And you can stay here as long as you want." I nodded, but my heart iced over like a frost-covered window. That night, I opened the drawer beside my bed, took out an old birthday card, and stared at its blank printed words. I tore it in half, then into quarters. It was the first time I didn't cry. Maybe I was only 7, but you don't need to be grown to know what it feels like to be replaced. I started keeping a journal, a little blue notebook Grandma Rose gave me. On the first page I wrote, "If I want to be seen, I'll have to learn how to stand up." I wasn't sure if I was recording or commanding myself. I just knew that night I pulled the curtains high, looked out at a sky full of stars, and whispered in my head, "If I'm a shadow now, someday I'll be the light, so bright they can't help but look back." I didn't know how, I didn't know when. But that belief, that was the beginning of a journey I never imagined I'd take. I was called back home on an autumn morning when the leaves had just started to turn gold and the cold wind crept through the cracks in the windows. I was 8, Logan was nearly 2. Mom called Grandma Rose, sounding gentle. "We think it's time Grace came home. She'll love being a big sister." When Grandma hung up, she didn't look at me. She simply told me to pack my things, then stepped out to water the geraniums on the porch. I knew she was hiding something, and I pretended not to see it. Dad came to pick me up. Mom didn't come along. The entire drive back, he didn't ask if I was doing okay, or if I missed home. He just turned on the radio, letting the news fill the silence between two strangers. When the car stopped in front of what used to be my home, my heart caught in my chest. The front lawn was filled with colorful plastic toys. A bright red slide blocked the walkway, and across the window was a cheerful banner that read, "Welcome, baby Logan." There was no sign welcoming me back. I stepped inside. The air reeked of fresh laundry detergent and baby formula. Mom rushed down the stairs with Logan in her arms, smiling radiantly when she saw me. But that smile wasn't for me. She kissed Logan on the cheek, then turned to me. "Grace, you're home! Did you miss your little brother?" Before I could answer, she handed me a plastic bag full of toys. "Can you take these upstairs to your room? We need to clear the hallway so the baby can crawl." I pulled my suitcase up the stairs, but when I opened the door to my old room, I froze. The walls had been repainted sky blue. My bed was gone, replaced by a fabric play tent shaped like a castle. Stuffed animals, toy trucks, cloth books, everything belonged to another child. My room was now Logan's. I stood there, motionless, for a long while. Mom came upstairs and saw me still standing in the doorway. "Oh, we thought Logan needed the space more," she said quickly. "You'll sleep in the living room for now. I've already set up a fold-out bed for you. It gets good sunlight. You'll like it." I nodded. Because good daughters aren't supposed to protest. For the first 3 days, I tried to adjust. I woke up early, helped Mom prepare formula, watched Logan while she showered. I folded clothes, played with him while they joined Zoom meetings. Every time I did well, I was rewarded with a thanks, Grace. But when I made a mistake, I didn't just get scolded. That day, the sun was scorching. Mom brought me and Logan to the park nearby. "Watch your brother for 10 minutes, okay? I need to call the pediatrician." I nodded, lifted him out of the stroller, and led him to the playground. Logan ran all over, full of energy, refusing to stay still. I got caught up talking with Maddie, an old classmate I ran into. Just a few minutes, literally a few. Then I heard a scream. I turned around and saw Logan had climbed the tallest slide. He teetered at the edge like a dry leaf. Ran, but not fast enough. He fell, face down in the sand, screaming. Blood trickled from his knee. The world around me went silent. I picked him up, hands shaking, trying to comfort him, but he sobbed uncontrollably. Mom came running, still holding her phone. When she saw Logan, she shrieked, "Oh my God, Grace, what did you do to him?" I only looked away for a second, I stammered. A second? That's all it takes for him to break a tooth, you know? You can't even handle the simple task of watching your brother? Other parents turned to look. Someone pulled out their phone. I wished the ground would swallow me whole. I had made a mistake. But no one asked why an 8-year-old was solely responsible for a 2-year-old in public. On the drive home, Mom said nothing. Dad gripped the wheel, jaw clenched. Logan slept in the back seat, a bandage on his forehead. I pressed against the window, staring at my distorted reflection. That night, I didn't eat dinner. No one called me down. I curled up on the fold-out bed, blanket over my head. And for the first time in months, I whispered to myself, I'm not their daughter anymore. I'm just the babysitter. I was 12 when I accidentally overheard that conversation. It was a Friday evening. I had just aced my first perfect score essay, titled The Unseen Ones. My English teacher had called me to the front of the class to read it aloud. I'd brought the printed copy home, hoping Mom would pin it on the fridge like people used to do with kids' drawings. But when I walked in, no one even looked up. Logan, 6 years old, was playing with a remote-control plane on the living room floor. My parents were in the kitchen, the door cracked, warm yellow light spilling into the hall. I was about to walk in when I heard Dad say, "The bank confirmed. If we keep contributing each month, by the time Logan turns 18, the fund will cover his full college tuition. Room, board, books, everything." I froze, my heart skipping a beat. "So it'll be enough for St. Jude's, right?" Mom asked. "Yeah, and if he keeps his grades up, he might earn a sports scholarship too. That kid was born to pitch." That kid. They were talking about Logan like he was a long-term investment. "What about Grace?" Mom asked softly. I held my breath. "Grace is smart, but not exactly practical. A student like that will need scholarships. Worst case, she can start at community college. It's close by, doesn't cost much." I went rigid, my back pressed against the hallway wall. Community college. Doesn't cost much. I had just won the highest writing award in school, yet to them my future was summed up in 2 words: cheap option. Mom sighed. She's always been independent. She'll figure it out. I turned away, slipping the essay between the pages of my notebook. The next morning at breakfast, I tried to speak up. "Miss McCallan said I should consider the Emerson Prep program. It's a special track for gifted students, creative writing, language arts." Mom, pouring milk for Logan, didn't even look up. "Sounds complicated. Why don't you just stick with AP classes? That school isn't cheap." I forced a smile. "But Emerson offers scholarships. I might." Dad cut me off. "Focus on doing well in public school first. Emerson, Stanford, they're not going anywhere. And don't be dramatic. Logan's already working hard. We're all backing him right now." I looked at my brother sitting beside me, tapping away at his tablet, wearing a baseball jersey that read Logan 12 across the back. The house had a cabinet full of his trophies, team photos, and grinning snapshots with coaches. I didn't have a single picture on the wall past 3rd grade. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling, listening to my parents laugh in the living room while Logan retold a story from school. He had an audience. I had an old desk lamp and a folder of scholarship opportunities I'd researched online. Sunday morning, I quietly made photocopies of my essay and sent them to 3 places: a teen writing scholarship, a statewide short story contest, and a summer program at the University of Michigan. I didn't ask for their permission. I didn't need it. Because now I understood exactly where I stood. Not the model eldest daughter, but a mistake they were trying to forget. And if they thought I'd stay silent forever like the shadow they molded, They're about to witness a light they can't extinguish. I received my Stanford acceptance letter on a cool spring morning, one of those days where the sunlight hesitates behind the oak trees out front. The envelope was thick, embossed, and heavy, like a dream finally realized after years of silent endurance. A full scholarship, tuition, housing, books, all covered. I had done it. On my own. I stood in the kitchen, hands trembling as I opened the envelope, eyes welling with tears. I was just about to speak when Mom's voice echoed from the living room. "Logan, come see this. The national team's head coach just messaged. They've got their eye on you." I looked down at the letter in my hand. The word congratulations shimmered under the dull neon light. I walked into the living room, pressing the letter to my chest like a sacred relic. "Mom, Dad, I got a full scholarship to Stanford." No one turned around. Dad was adjusting the frame for the latest trophy Logan had brought home from the state championship. Mom was snapping photos of him in his team jersey to post online. They didn't even ask what I'd chosen to study. "What school did you say?" Mom asked, after a few seconds, her voice distracted. "Stanford," I repeated, louder. "Top-ranked school in the country." "In California? That's really far, are you sure? Living expenses are high out there." "I have a full scholarship," I said, gripping the letter tighter. "I won't need any financial help." That was when Dad finally looked up, muttering, "You should have considered Georgia State. It's close to home, less of a hassle." I nodded. No arguing. I didn't need to anymore. That night, I went into Dad's study to retrieve an old keepsake box from my childhood. I planned to tuck my acceptance letters inside for safekeeping. I didn't find the box, but I found something else. A folder of bank records. The top page read, "Education Savings Account Name, Grace Rollins. Balance, $0, 0 cents. I held my breath and flipped through previous months. Withdrawals, 200, 500, 1,000. The last one, just 2 weeks ago. $1,800 transferred to Rollins Family Athletic Support Fund. I took a step back, stunned. That was the money I'd saved since 6th grade. From academic awards, summer jobs at the library, and birthday checks from Grandma Rose. I'd believed they were holding it for me. I'd believed that... How foolish. The next morning, I skipped breakfast. I placed the bank statements in my Stanford letter on the table. "You spent my college fund," I said. Not a word about it. Dad glanced at the papers, then lowered his newspaper. "We've already discussed this, Grace. Logan's in private training. This year's tournament is huge. The whole family's focused on that goal." "That was my money," I said, emphasizing each word. "Not the family's." Mom sighed. "But you got a scholarship, Grace. Logan didn't. Sometimes in a family, we have to make sacrifices for each other." I laughed. A bitter, hollow laugh. "Since when does sacrifice mean staying silent while others take everything you worked for?" No one replied. I pulled a small envelope from my purse. A thank you note for Grandma Rose, the only one who had never forgotten I existed. "I'll be leaving in August," I said, my voice cold and steady. "And don't worry, from now on, I won't need a single dime from this family." I turned to leave, and in that final glance through the doorway, I saw Dad go back to reading, Mom return to the dishes, and Logan testing his new baseball bat in the middle of the living room. I wasn't hurt anymore, just numb, like a metal trophy left to rust in a garage after awards night. I was sitting in my Stanford dorm room when the phone rang. Caller ID, Grandma Rose. Answered immediately. It had been nearly 2 months since our last call. The one where she reminded me to eat properly and stay warm in the chilly California nights. "Grace," she said, her voice hesitant. "I checked my bank statements today. There's something you need to know." I sat upright. "For the past 2 years, I've been sending you $500 each month to help with books, housing, groceries, but I just discovered the account it was going to isn't actually in your name." My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" "Your father opened the account using your name, but it's actually a joint account with your parents. I think they've taken every dollar." I stood up, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. I logged into my personal bank account, the one I thought I had full control over. Balance: just over $300. "You've been sending money for 24 months?" I asked, my voice rasping. "Yes, that's $12,000 total," she confirmed. "You mean to tell me you never got a cent?" I didn't respond. My mind sank like a stone into deep water. Every memory came flooding back. Nights spent eating instant noodles, times I skipped buying textbooks and borrowed scanned copies, the tears I shed when I couldn't afford a plane ticket home for the holidays. I had struggled to survive, while my parents used that money to send Logan to elite baseball training camps in Florida. I gripped the phone. They lied. They said there was no money left, that I had to manage on my own. There was a brief silence. Then Grandma Rose spoke again, no longer gentle. "No, we're not letting this go this time." 2 weeks later, I flew back to Georgia unannounced. Grandma Rose met me at the airport, hugging me tight, the kind of hug that needs no explanation. In her hand was a neatly clipped folder: transfer receipts, bank statements, and even a confirmation message from an old bank clerk. That afternoon, I knocked on the front door of my old house. Mom opened it, surprised. "Grace? Why didn't you call first?" I stepped in without smiling. "I'll only be here a few days. I have something to say." Dad was watching sports news. Logan, peeling an apple, nodded at me like I was still part of the family. But I wasn't. I placed the folder on the glass coffee table in the middle of the living room. "Grandma Rose just told me over the last 2 years she's sent $12,000 to support my college education," I said, locking eyes with them. "And I haven't seen a single dollar." No one said a word. "She sent the money to an account in my name, but one you created and controlled. What did you use the money for?" Mom gripped Dad's hand, her eyes beginning to waver. My father took a deep breath. "Logan got the opportunity for private coaching down south. You already have a scholarship, Grace. Logan doesn't." "That's not an answer," I said, my voice cold as midnight frost. "That's an excuse for theft." "Don't be dramatic," Mom snapped. "We're family." "Family?" I gave a soft laugh. "Then why is it that when I was struggling to afford meals, tuition, and basic books, no one called even once to ask if I was okay? Why did Logan get a full support system and I got a single bed in a dorm and discounted ramen?" My father fell silent. My mother lowered her head. Logan, only now grasping the weight of it, stood up suddenly. I didn't know. I thought that money was meant just for me." I looked at my brother, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. Only exhaustion. "It's not your fault, Logan, but you grew up in a home where I was nothing more than the shadow behind your accomplishments." I picked up the folder and turned my back on the house that used to be home. Grandma Rose was waiting outside in the car, holding a basket of freshly baked cookies. "We can sue if you want," she said. I shook my head. "No, I'm going to do more than that." "What do you mean?" I opened my bag and pulled out the confirmation letter from the bank. I had opened a new, separate account and was preparing to file a complaint if they ever tried anything again. "I'm going to expose everything, but more importantly, I won't let them do this to anyone else. I'm going to stand tall." And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just the kid who endured. I was Grace, the one who would reclaim what was hers, with logic, with proof, and with the dignity they tried so hard to bury. I hadn't planned on coming back. Honestly, after everything that had happened, I saw no reason to ever step foot in that house again. But Grandma Rose, her voice firm yet trembling, had said, "Grace, this might be the last Thanksgiving I get to spend with the whole family." I couldn't say no. Not for my parents, not for Logan, but for the only woman who had never left me behind, even when the whole world had. So that afternoon, I put on a dark sweater and held my daughter Ellie's hand as we stepped into the house that once rejected us. Ellie had just turned 5, her eyes bright and innocent, just like mine had once been. When my mom opened the door, she knelt to hug Ellie with affection, while I received an awkward nod. The living room was just like I remembered. Wall-to-wall photos of Logan, from his toddler years to his championship wins. Not a single picture of me. Of course. We sat down for dinner. The turkey was golden, the cranberry sauce glossy, everything picture perfect. Unless you noticed the thin ice between me and the rest of the table. Only Grandma Rose beside me felt real. Ellie, ever the sweet child, chattered on about preschool, her friend Max, and the dog who could catch a ball, making the whole table laugh. Even my dad, for the first time in years, I saw him smile. But it didn't last long. Because then Ellie turned to my mom and said, "Nana, Mommy said you only call her when you need money, like a piggy bank." The words shattered the room like glass. Everyone froze. Logan stopped mid-bite. My dad set his knife down. My mom, pale as a ghost. I didn't flinch. I didn't try to smooth it over. I set my fork down and nodded at Ellie. "You told the truth, sweetheart. You don't have to apologize for that." "Grace," Mom said, voice shaking, "you've misunderstood. It's not like that." I gave a tight smile, devoid of warmth. "What exactly have I misunderstood? That my childhood was treated like a rough draft? That every dollar Grandma Rose sent so I could survive college was drained to send Logan to elite baseball camps?" Dad growled, "This isn't the time for this." "I think," I replied, voice calm but sharp as a blade, "it's never the right time to bring up the truth to people who are used to ignoring it." I turned to Logan, his eyes filled with guilt. "Did you know I almost missed my scholarship interview because I couldn't afford a plane ticket, while you flew first class to Florida for tournaments?" "I didn't know," Logan murmured, "because I knew it wouldn't matter. This family only invests in those who bring immediate glory." Mom began to cry. I did what I thought was best for all of us." I pulled an envelope from my coat pocket and placed it on the table. "This is every bank statement from Grandma Rose's transfers, every withdrawal receipt. Same date, same time. Every month. Nearly $12,000. Plus the savings account you emptied, without an apology. I've already sent copies to my attorney." "You're suing us?" Dad barked, face red. "No," I stood. "I'm making sure my daughter grows up in truth, not in a family that hides selfishness and favoritism behind the excuse of love." I picked up Ellie. She leaned against my shoulder, still too young to understand, whispering, "Mommy, are you sad?" I shook my head. "No, baby, I feel lighter." I looked around the room one last time. My eyes met Grandma Rose's, her silent nod, a quiet blessing. Then I spoke, voice low but firm. "Thank you for showing me exactly who I never want to become." And I walked out that door, for the last time, not in tears, but in freedom. Rain had begun to fall as I stepped outside, Ellie in my arms, the daughter carrying everything I once longed for, a chance to begin again. Grandma Rose followed close behind, clutching her old knit coat, her eyes steadier than I had ever seen. We got in the car. No one said a word. The windows streaked with raindrops, as if the sky itself had rejected that false Thanksgiving. I dropped Grandma Rose off first. As I parked in front of her porch, she placed a hand on mine and said, softly but firmly, "You did the right thing, Grace. Right for you, and right for Ellie. Don't ever let anyone make you think justice is too much to ask." I nodded, steadying my voice. "I'm not looking back anymore, Grandma." She nodded. "And I'll never let you walk alone." The next morning, I sent an email to the law office I had hired in Palo Alto. Subject: "Files ready. Proceeding to next step." I attached everything: Grandma Rose's transfer records, my emptied savings account, Logan's coaching invoices, signed by my father. Every line was a scar, not just on my finances, but on the trust they had ripped apart without mercy. Within 48 hours, I received confirmation that my files had been backed up to 3 different systems, including one sent directly to a media representation firm. In the event of coercion or any attempt to silence you, my attorney wrote, the file will be automatically released if we don't receive a safety confirmation within 7 days. I read that and smiled. For the first time, I wasn't afraid anymore. That same day, I went to the bank and opened a trust account under the name Ellie Rose Martin. The sole beneficiary was my daughter, and the only trustees were myself and my lawyer. The fund started with $10,000 I had saved from my writing work, along with leftover scholarship money. Not much, but enough for me to know I was doing the right thing. I signed the documents, my pen steady, and slid the papers across the desk. I want to be absolutely sure, I said, that no one, not even biological family, can touch a single cent of this without my permission. Not even if I'm gone. The woman across from me looked up, her eyes soft. You're doing something incredible for your daughter. I nodded. Not because of the compliment, but because I knew I was writing a brand new chapter. A few days later, I received a message from my mother. No greeting, no apology. Just this. We are still family. Don't take this too far. Logan hasn't eaten since that day. I stared at the screen for a few minutes. Then I held down the message and hit block. Family is not where you lose your sense of worth. Family doesn't use blood ties as justification for greed and manipulation. And I was no longer that quiet, obedient little girl. That night, Ellie and I made cookies together in the kitchen. The scent of vanilla and cinnamon filled our small third-floor apartment. She giggled when the dough stuck to her nose. I pulled out my phone and snapped a picture. And for the first time, I saw it clearly in the frame. There was no void left to fill. No one had to allow me to be happy. I sent the photo to Grandma Rose, along with a short caption. Freedom tastes like cinnamon cookies, crispy outside, warm inside. Before going to bed, I pulled another envelope from my drawer. Thicker, heavier, still unsent. Inside were all the financial abuse records, along with a note I'd written months ago. I don't need forgiveness. I don't want your fake affection. Here is all the proof. I don't expect you to admit anything, but understand this. Every action has a price. I hadn't mailed it, not because I changed my mind, but because I wanted them to know. My silence now is a warning. No longer weakness, but restrained strength. 6 years had passed since the night I walked out of that house with Ellie and Grandma Rose. 6 years. Long enough for everything to change so much, I sometimes wondered if I'd truly left my old life behind, or was just dreaming a better version of myself. But every morning, when I woke up in the attic apartment overlooking the San Francisco Bay, heard the toaster pop, and watched Ellie, now 11, sneak out of bed to strum her ukulele before school, I knew this wasn't a dream. This was my real life, one I had built from the ashes of a painful past. I became a senior financial analyst at a major investment firm in the Bay Area. Each day, I worked with numbers, spreadsheets, risk strategies, the very things that haunted my childhood, shaped by my parents' chaotic finances. Now, I used them as tools to create security and independence for others, and for myself. Irony is never coincidence. It's structured justice. 3 years ago, I met Owen, the first man who didn't see me as a spreadsheet or a shadow behind someone else's spotlight. We met at a finance workshop hosted by my firm. He wasn't afraid to ask questions, to challenge ideas, and, most importantly, to look me in the eye and ask, Grace, after everything, what do you actually want for yourself? I couldn't answer right away, but I knew it was the first time someone genuinely cared about the real answer, not just the polite version. We started with coffee, then came late-night dinners after work, spontaneous weekend trips, and one day, a quiet, strangely powerful proposal. I don't want to rescue you, Grace. I just want to walk beside you. I said yes, not because I needed to be loved, but because I finally realized I deserved to be. We had a small wedding, just a few close friends, and Grandma Rose, her hand still holding mine like the first day she led me into that dusty old attic. I didn't invite my parents. I didn't need blessings from people who once traded me for a shinier dream. A few months later, I got pregnant with our second child, a baby boy we named Miles. Owen chose the name, saying it sounded like a journey. I didn't argue, because he was one. A journey of healing, of trust, of opening my heart again. Once, Owen asked, "Do you think Ellie knows how your past affects how you parent her?" I stayed quiet for a while, then said, "I think, yes. But I hope she sees I didn't run from it. I chose to rise through it. That's the difference." In our living room, we hung photo frames, not just of family milestones, but of Ellie dancing ballet, Miles taking his first steps, Grandma Rose laughing in the garden. No baseball trophies, no framed awards treated like tokens for love. Just real moments, and enough. I didn't become a millionaire, but I made enough to start the Rose Martin Scholarship Fund for young women who'd been overlooked by their families. One day, I got an email from a student in the program. She wrote, "Thank you for helping me believe I don't need anyone's approval to have value." Cried. For the first time in years, I cried from happiness. Now, when I look in the mirror each morning, I no longer see the girl who once stood silently outside her brother's room, listening to her parents plan the future of their real child. I see Grace Martin, a woman who no longer needs anyone's permission to be seen. Because at last, she has claimed herself. The email came on a Monday morning, just after I wrapped up our weekly team meeting. Subject: Urgent, family needs help. Elena Marlowe _57@gmail.com. My mother's old address. I had blocked her from every social platform long ago, but I'd forgotten emails still work. The message wasn't long, but it stopped me cold. "Grace, I write this in hopes you'll reconsider. The house has been repossessed by the bank. Your father had a mild stroke from the stress. And Logan has been arrested. They say he embezzled nearly $40,000 from the college baseball team fund to pay off gambling debts. We have nothing left. I don't know who else to turn to but you. If you can, help us one last time." I didn't reply, not out of hatred, but because I needed time to breathe. All day, I couldn't focus. I left work early, held Ellie longer than usual, then opened my laptop and started reading local news from Georgia. Logan had been arrested while attempting to transfer the remaining stolen funds into his personal account. There were surveillance images, concrete evidence. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for next month. In a brief interview clip, my mother appeared, hair disheveled, eyes sunken, saying, "We did everything for our son. We never imagined it would come to this." I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. Everything for the son, how familiar that sounded. For over 30 years, they'd bet everything on Logan. And now, they'd lost it all. I took a night to think it through. Not whether to help, but how to do it in a way that would close this chapter for good. The next day, I went to the bank. I issued 2 checks, each sealed in a separate envelope. The first read, "Pay to the order of Elaine and Richard Marlowe, to cover outstanding debt with the bank." The amount, just enough to stop them from losing everything, but not enough to create new debt. The second read, "Pay to the order of Ellie Rose Martin Trust Fund, to supplement the education fund, accessible only by legal guardians." The same amount as the first. 2 destinies, 2 futures, 2 choices. I placed both in a large envelope, along with a handwritten letter. Not long, but clear enough. "Mom and Dad, this is the last time I will attach my name to any financial obligation tied to this family. I'm not doing this out of gratitude, because I no longer have anything to be grateful for. I'm not doing it out of pity because you never spared a second of compassion for me as a child. I'm doing this so I can shut this door with no debts left behind. With the same amount, I've created a new fund for Ellie, so her future won't be touched by our past. I don't expect a thank you. I don't need an apology. But from now on, let me and my children live without being dragged down by the choices you refuse to take responsibility for. Goodbye, Grace. I sent the envelope via certified mail, signature required. Documented. When I received confirmation the next afternoon that it had been delivered, I simply deleted the email and blocked the sender. No announcement, no drama, no one needed to know. Except me. That evening, Ellie and Miles were drawing in the living room. Owen was making dinner in the kitchen, and I stood by the window, watching the city glow with lights. I didn't feel proud. I felt peaceful, because for the first time in my life, I knew with certainty. Helping no longer felt like an obligation, it was a choice. And that choice was mine, no one else's. I didn't think I'd ever return to Grandma Rose's old house after all those years. But one late autumn afternoon, she called, her voice raspy but gentle, and told me she'd found an old trunk in the attic. The one your mother left behind when she first got married. And I knew it was time. I drove down on a Saturday morning. Ellie came with me, holding her stuffed rabbit tightly, asking, "Mom, did you really live here before?" I smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. This was where I grew up. And where I first learned how to stand on my own." Grandma Rose was waiting on the porch, still wrapped in that old knit shawl I once thought she'd never take off. She didn't say much, just led me up to the attic, where light streamed through the wooden slats and broken beams, casting memory-colored stripes over the thick layers of dust. The old trunk lay at the bottom, hidden beneath a few wool blankets. When I opened the lid, what I found stopped me cold. A box of old letters, a few soft leather-bound journals, and a yellowed black and white photo. I picked up the photo. In it was my mother, Elaine, as a young girl. Standing next to her was a boy around 10, beaming with a large trophy in his hand. My mother stood slightly behind him, face solemn, holding a book. "That's Uncle Scott," Grandma Rose said behind me. "Your mom's older brother?" I turned around. She never mentioned him. Grandma nodded. "Because she didn't want to. As a child, Elaine was treated no differently than you were, Grace. Her parents always favored Scott. She was smart, well-behaved, but never praised. Scott only had to bring home a county trophy, and the whole family threw a party." I clutched the photo tighter. "And you let that happen?" I asked softly. She bowed her head. "I wasn't strong enough back then. I didn't speak up when I should have. That was my greatest mistake. And it's why I tried to do everything differently with you." My eyes sat down on the cold wooden floor, eyes still locked on the photo. Part of me wanted to be angry at my mother for repeating the same cycle, for doubling down on pain instead of healing it. But another part understood. And understood why she couldn't see she was hurting her daughter, because she herself had once been the invisible child in her own home. Unhealed trauma becomes survival instinct, and sometimes survival means hurting others without even knowing it. I picked up one of the journals. The handwriting was slanted, full of emotion. "Mom, I got a perfect score in English today. But Dad told me not to brag, said it might make Scott feel bad. I didn't mean to make anyone sad. I just wanted someone to see me." I couldn't hold back my tears. Not for myself, but for the younger version of my mother, the little girl who had once sat quietly in a dark corner, longing to be called by her name instead of being mistaken for someone else's shadow. Ellie sat beside me, curiously peeking at the journal. "Mom, who wrote that?" I wiped my tears. "Your grandma, baby. She wrote it when she was just a little girl, just like you." "Are you sad, Grandma?" I nodded. "Very sad. And that's why I want you to grow up with joy, not with the feeling that you have to earn love." Ellie wrapped her arms around me. Simple and warm, like late autumn sunlight filtering through the attic window. In that moment, I understood. Healing doesn't come from surviving pain. It comes from ending it, not passing it on, not repeating it, not letting it define who we are. And I, Grace Martin, would be the last woman in that line. The one who chose to end the generational wound with compassion, with awareness, and with real love for those who come after. I saw Logan again on a March afternoon, 6 months after the trial ended and he was granted probation for his charges of embezzlement and minor financial fraud. Owen had just carried baby Miles upstairs from the playground. Ellie was busy coloring in the living room. I was cleaning an old wooden cabinet passed down from Grandma Rose when the doorbell rang. And somehow I already knew, before I looked through the peephole, that it was Logan. He stood on the front steps, noticeably thinner, his hair no longer neatly trimmed, and his eyes looking at me like someone who had finally learned how to see past illusions. "Grace," he began, slowly. "I'm not expecting forgiveness, but I think I needed to say this, at least once." I didn't answer. I simply opened the door wider and stepped aside. We sat on the back porch. He looked out toward the small lemon tree I'd planted when we moved in. I brewed tea and set a cup in front of him. No questions about sugar. Some things didn't need to be complicated anymore. "I know I was given too much without ever understanding why," Logan started. "When everything fell apart, I realized it wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that I was never taught that people deserve love, even when they don't win." I looked down at my hands, remembering a childhood of being overlooked, treated like the temporary babysitter, forgotten, even when I was standing in my own home. "I don't need an apology," I said softly, "because I stopped waiting for one a long time ago." Logan nodded silently. "I just want to try to be better, to start somewhere, even if it's late." I looked up, my gaze no longer angry, just tired, finally at rest. "Then start by never repeating what made others hurt because of you. To anyone. Especially your children, if you ever have them." He nodded. "I understand." I didn't walk him to the door. There was no need. Forgiveness isn't a ceremony. It's simply a choice to no longer let that person control any part of your life. That night, after Ellie was asleep and Miles lay quietly in his crib, I sat in the small office off our kitchen. On the desk, a blank sheet of paper, a pen, and silence. No longer heavy, just peaceful. I began to write. "Dear Ellie, if you're reading this, I may no longer be with you. Or you've entered a moment in life that feels too much, too messy. I want you to know some pain didn't start with you. But if you don't place a period at the end, it will continue. Endlessly. Your grandma once was a girl abandoned by her own parents. I was once a girl treated like a shadow behind someone else. But I chose not to pass that on to you. And I believe that one day, if you have a daughter, you'll do the same. You may meet someone who doesn't believe in your worth. You may love someone who doesn't deserve it. You may get hurt. But never let them make that pain your identity. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Ellie. It's how you pull the hook out of your heart so you can move forward more freely. I'm not perfect, but I lived with clarity so that you could grow up knowing this. You are seen. You are loved. You are enough. Whether I'm here or not, that will always be true. With love." Mom, Grace. I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and wrote on the front, "Open only when you feel like you're not enough." I locked it away, not to hide it but to protect it. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, I stood beside Owen and the kids, making 2 cups of hot cocoa. I knew life would still have its challenges. There would still be pain. But this time, I no longer carried stones in my heart. I had to put them down, in a place where the past could finally rest. No longer chains. Just an old story. Grace's story is a powerful reminder that no one is born to be someone else's shadow, even within their own family. Generational trauma only ends when someone is brave enough to draw the line. In real life, many people silently carry wounds caused by twisted expectations and conditional love. But as Grace proved, we all have the right to choose differently. To choose kindness, freedom, and unconditional love, because sometimes the most profound revenge is simply living a better life. What do you think about Grace's journey? Would you forgive or walk away like she did? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more real, moving, and meaningful stories about family and life.